Welcome to the Gold Standard here from the 440 Sports Network, and of course, a big part of Lower Broad Hockey on Substack. My name is Braden Gall, and you can get to me on whatever godforsaken social media app you still waste your time on at Braden Gall.
And I'm Emma Lingan, and you can get to me at Emma_Lingan.
Yeah, there you have it. Emma does never waste time anywhere. Only the best content. So Michael is not with us. He's still alive. He's on vacation. He's on vacation.
Imagine if that's how you announced that Michael was dead.
Yaroslav Askarov has announced he would like to request a trade and RIP Gallagher.
Yeah, I get second billing.
How about RIP Gallagher's mentions? How about that?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what's happened here on the pod. So if you are watching on YouTube, we already have Patrick in the comments. If you are watching on YouTube and you'd like to encourage others to watch, we'd appreciate that. Give us a little thumbs up and, of course, share the product. If you are watching on Twitter or Facebook, please, by the way, share the product, rate, review, subscribe on the podcast app. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. So we have a lot of stuff to get to on the show today because the content gods, Emma, the content gods have blessed us. Now, I personally think all of the internet has overreacted to all of this, but we will work our way through this a little bit today on the show. So, obviously, Yaroslav Askarov requests a trade. Ryan Johansen is in material breach of contract, according to the Flyers, and they are going to terminate his contract or have terminated his contract. All of this is, of course, everyone has to yell and scream about what this means as a reflection on Barry Trotz. And what does it mean for the future? What did they screw up? What did they not screw up? There's so much going on here. But again, in the third week of August, still weeks away from players reporting to training camp, thank you, content gods, for giving us lots of controversy to discuss today on the show. So where do you want to start him?
Yeah, anywhere. Let's start with Askarov. Let's start with that because people have some feelings about that.
So I've had a day and a half here to think through this, and I'm glad that we've had time to sort of think about this for a day or two without just sort of jumping right into what we think would if it sort of breaks live. And that's partly why I love this forum, and especially shout out to Lower Broad Hockey. Sign up for a subscription. The whole point of that website and that community and that group of folks is to be right, not first. That is the key. And I want to be right on this. And it feels like, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, which I know you've done in the past and have no problem doing. I feel like kind of all things are true on this. And it feels like he's Askarov. It's understandable if you want to take time to think about his perspective, why he would want to play. Okay, not hard to do. It would be understandable for a player who knows his team has been trying to trade him for over a year to be okay with leaving the organization. That is a normal human thing to think. It's also, I think, okay for the Predators to re-sign a Vezina caliber goaltender to try to win today instead of banking on a player who they clearly feel is not ready to play in the NHL. The leverage debate we can get to in a second about what this does to Barry Trotz's leverage and what it means about Barry Trotz's decision-making. But I sort of think in just the confines of the actual story itself, this shouldn't be new news to anybody that the Predators are interested in trading Askarov. It's not news to him. It's not news to Barry Trotz. It's not news to other GMs. It feels like everything is kind of true in this situation and that none of it is really all that unreasonable. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I think the way I see it, like you said, multiple things can be true. And that's where I think people lose sight of that sometimes. I think taking a step back, it is absolutely, acceptable to say, I think it was difficult to see Askarov having a future playing in Nashville before any of this happened. It was already difficult to see that he had a future. It was also difficult to blame him for wanting to leave and wanting to go somewhere else where he had a clearer path to the NHL where he thinks he's ready to play, or at least play sooner. Where I take issue with this is the way that he went about it. And I think that it's, again, none of this is surprising. When he came out and said that when he came out and said that he wants to play in the NHL and he that it's NHL or nothing. Like, that's not surprising information. What I think, like, I don't think his motive is bad or wrong. I think it was the execution that was kind of the problem. And I think that he has now, like you said, we'll get to the leverage conversation in a minute, but I think that he has now damaged his own reputation a little bit, just because, again, if you like, we've talked about how skilled he is as a goalie forever, and it's true, he is, but I think that you got to look at the facts that he's got 3 games of NHL experience, and he has yet to make it through the Calder Cup playoffs without losing his starter's net. Like, I'm sorry, dude, but that works against you. And you may think that you're all that, and you may very well be all that, but I think that the way to prove that at this stage in your career is to prove it. Actually go back and do the work. Don't make it just seems like a very bold statement to kind of put your foot down at age 22 with 3 games of NHL experience and just say, "I'm not reporting to the AHL anymore." It seems a little childish. Like, I don't know.
Well, and in some weird, strange, crazy roundabout way, he almost proves the Predators correct in their evaluation of his
Maturity.
maturities. It's the only like word that really works here, Emma, but it almost feels like it's maybe not I would say like emotional and mental development, which is again what Mitch Korn talked about in our interview. I thought if you read that interview and listened to that interview and read the story I wrote about it, and then you saw this headline, there is no way you would be surprised by Yaroslav Askarov wanting to be out. I agree with you. I don't know what he gains personally from releasing this out into the wild. Because again, what it does look like, and I'm not saying this is true or right, but what it looks like is that he is proving the Predators correct, that he is not yet quite there yet in terms of emotionally and mentally handling the spotlight, the situation, whatever.
Yeah.
And facts and evidence will indicate losing your starting crease in the playoffs is an example of not being able to sort of, I don't want to, again, it's hard to say control yourself or maturity. Those are not necessarily the right terms, but you know what I mean?
I do. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is that, we can all agree. Askarov, emotional, passionate dude. We see that in the way that he plays. And that emotion, that passion can be a great strength if he channels it correctly.
Yep.
And he clearly has not yet channeled that correctly in his play. And that's when that strength becomes a weakness. And I think that that's, that all comes with maturation, development, coaching, all those things that I think that you just need to kind of look at the big picture. And I think that he has now made this emotionally charged decision, statement, whatever, where it's like, okay, that emotion and that passion that you have is once again kind of biting you in the ass because you're not channeling it properly and you're not putting your head down and just letting your game do the talking.
Yeah. And the quote from Korn in my conversation was, quote, "Emotions need to help you get better. When the emotions become too strong to manage mentally, that's when we get into problems." That was not, I want to be very clear, that was not in relation to Askarov. I did not ask him. He gave me no comment on Askarov directly. Also a telling answer in all of this. Again, if you are on Lower Broad Hockey, none of this should be a surprise. They also, when I asked about Scott Wedgwood, and we talked about this last week, it was very clear that Yaroslav Askarov was not an option to replace Kevin Lankinen. He was not an option in their mind. In his mind, it might be different. And that's fair, too. You should always want to believe in yourself. I even think it's unfair, Emma, to do what you kind of did just then, which is to say, like, he decided to go public with the trade request out of emotional. We don't even know if that's true. We know that he did it, and maybe it was a very calculated thing that he as an agent decided, and I don't know. But if he's all in his feelings and going public with this, that would also track with his behavior and with his personality type, which, again, I want to be clear on this, I don't think is a problem, and I don't think Barry Trotz thinks it's a problem. I don't think a big personality and a guy with a lot of passion is the problem. I think it is that he is not ready to play goalie in the NHL is the problem. And the reason he's not ready is the other stuff, but it doesn't mean that once it's figured out that the Preds are opposed to that type of player in their organization. Again, Barry Trotz couldn't coach offense until all of a sudden he won a cup and could coach offense. So like, I don't, he's very clearly evolved his coaching style over the years. We'll get to leverage here, but I just think it's sort of all things are true. Like he's not ready. He wasn't an option for the Predators. And here's the other thing. Emma, I don't know why that is a reflection on Barry Trotz's decision-making. I don't. If you're an NFL franchise and you do not have a starting quarterback on your team, you don't normally, occasionally it happens, but normally you don't let the starting quarterback, you don't trade the starting quarterback or let him walk in free agency. You sign him to a deal because he gives you the best chance to win now. And signing UC Saros, a far more proven commodity at what some could argue is a below market deal, to be the goaltender for the foreseeable future on a team that's trying to win today is the right decision, not the wrong decision. So I am grasping at straws trying to figure out why Yaroslav Askarov, who is not ready to be in the NHL, asking for a trade, which we know Barry Trotz has been trying to do for over a year, is somehow a reflection on Barry Trotz's decision-making. I don't understand those dots getting connected right now. I don't.
Yeah, because like you said, it's not like it had never been a consideration before 2 days ago that Barry Trotz would trade Yaroslav Askarov. It's not like he's going to be, oh, well, now you've requested it. Okay, well, let me go get that done for you. Like, I think it's something that he's been trying to do for a while. But as he said, not even just in the context of this player, but just in general. I mean, we heard it at the trade deadline last year, like with guys that we assumed would be gone, like Tyson Barrie, Alex Carrier. Like, it's not apples to apples, but still, it's in a sense, it's the same, because Barry Trotz wasn't going to accept an offer for any player, even if it was known, like with Tyson Barrie, that, he was trying to offload him and trying to get out. He wasn't going to accept an offer that he considered to be not a good offer, or like he wasn't going to get lowballed, and he wasn't going to do anything that wasn't going to help the team get better, because that was his focus. Like, he didn't have to trade anybody. And so, like, to him, the focus is on what can I get in return that's going to give this team the best chance to win. The focus is not on, all right, I got to get this guy out of here. Like, let's get rid of him, because I think that he needs to know that he is like, he knows what his best trade chips are. And I think that so obviously he understands that Askarov is going to be one of his best trade chips, right, and a guy who is expendable in the sense that he's not going to be part of the recipe. If the Predators go to the Stanley Cup this year, I'm sorry, but Askarov was not going to be the reason. He's not even going to be a small part of the reason. So if you're looking in that win now timeline, he is expendable and he could get you a good return.
So a couple of comments here. I want to get these out. Max says Poile drafted Askarov, not Trotz. Saros is Trotz guy. Certainly Trotz didn't technically draft Saros either. That would have also been Poile, just for the record. But I agree that you can't hang Askarov, the prospect, around Barry Trotz. That's a David Poile selection. That was David Poile's decision to bring him in. And Mr. Brazil, I think, is the right way to say this here, which is, he says, I wonder if going public and not going to the AHL was a tactic to get Barry to accept something he wouldn't normally. Doubt it would work, though. So here's ultimately where, if you want to be, because I don't live in the Twitter sewers anymore, Emma, so I don't know exactly what people, fans, you folks out there. I read the Lower Broad Hockey chat room, and we have fun in there.
It's a much happier place to be.
It is. I take time with my own thoughts on this, and then I do a little digging, and I try to ask around and try to figure out what's going on. And I think,
you mean you educate yourself before forcing your opinions on other people? Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately my wife is the sounding board, so I'm like, what do you think about this Askarov trade, honey? And she's like, I don't give a shit. So here's if you want to like reach, and I'll play devil's advocate here, if you want to reach for criticisms of Barry Trotz in this situation, I think one could be, hey, maybe last year's draft he wasn't really ready to wheel and deal like a GM yet. I would say the trade deadline might disagree with that. The trade deadline where Poyle made a bunch of moves, but probably were all approved by Trotz from a strategy standpoint, learning at the feet of David Poyle in real time. I would say that he was probably ready for the job, having, been in the NHL for his whole life. But maybe that's a thing. Like, hey, maybe he was a little inexperienced as a GM and the draft was his first time and he wasn't really fully ready to pull the trigger. You could also maybe be critical of Trotz and say, if you didn't value this player as highly as everybody else did, which may be the case, which every fantasy player of every sport understands, you try to sell your pieces as high as they can be valued to someone else who values them more than you. That's basic information. Maybe there was an offer he should have taken. That I'm okay. If you're like, look, that's an offer, but like, how do we know that? How do you know what the offer was? How do you know it was the right decision? We won't. Only Barry Trotz will know, man, I should have made that move. Or I'm glad I didn't make that move. So if you want to be critical, I think those are kind of like the only like ways you can do it. And I just think that's really reaching in a situation where he had nothing to do with the situation.
Well, and it's hard too when you don't know what the offers were that he was getting, and you don't know. It's hard to say, oh, he should have taken an offer. Like, we don't know what they were. I think that, and like you said, a lot of time, with trades in general, you don't know whether it was a good trade or a bad trade until sometimes years after. So it's just hard to say.
Yeah, Josh says this very well. Askarov is a 22-year-old goalie prospect, one of the most volatile positions in sports. Trotz cannot move on from a current top 5 goalie in the world to keep a prospect happy. Amen, Josh. Amen. So that's how I feel about this, is he had a choice to make. I'm either going to try to win with a goaltender who's proven and probably need to pony up a couple of extra years of term that I don't really want to do, but that's what I got to do to get this done. Or I can take a very risky prospect who's very talented, see if what we can do with him, and see what happens over the next 3 to 4 years, not knowing at all what that means for the organization. And if I'm a fan of the team, I want to see competitive winning hockey games right now. Not a very, and again, I think the interesting personality would have been fun. I'm saying would have, like he's already been traded. I am interested to see what happens when he shows up at camp. And he's like, so here's where I think it'll be interesting. If Barry, this is not going to happen, but there's like a 3% chance it happens. So bear with me on this. If Yaroslav Askarov comes into camp and is so effing good that he's better than Scott Wedgwood, and Barry Trotz caves and puts him on the roster, that would be a sign of weakness, in my opinion. But it might also be the right thing to do. So I don't know.
Again, I go back to, like, I think it was absolutely lip service when Barry Trotz said at the end of after the free agency opened, when he said, the expectation is that Askarov is going to come into camp and compete with Scott Wedgwood. No, he's not. Like that. You don't sign Scott Wedgwood if you have any glimmer of a, idea that Askarov would be. I think it was more to kind of light a fire under Askarov's ass and be like, hey, come ready to play. But also you have to think about, like you said, he was never an option to back up UC Saros. As a top goalie prospect, you don't want him to be a backup now. It doesn't make sense.
Mitch said it. To develop your game, you have to play every night.
Yes. And also, if you want to take it a step even further, without Askarov, what do you have in net in Milwaukee? Not much. So it's like he kind of had to be that was part of the plan.
That is like the last possible thing to consider, though.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, though, when you're looking at organizational depth. If you're talking about making a long run to the Stanley Cup and you get to add a third goalie to your roster, down the stretch. I think that
Askarov sounds like a great one for that.
Well, no, if it were up to him, it's Saros to be a third goalie. Askarov starting every night.
Okay, so here's the other thing. Yaroslav Askarov's not even the number 3 option. He was the number 4 option because they wanted Kevin Lankinen. They wanted Kevin Lankinen to stay as the backup goaltender. Kevin Lankinen was their top choice. That was not an organizational decision. Verbatim from Mitch Korn's mouth. That was not an organizational decision. That was Kevin Lankinen's decision, in which case they went to their next option, which was not Yaroslav Askarov. It was Scott Wedgwood. So in theory, it was UC Saros 1, Kevin Lankinen 2, Scott Wedgwood 3, and Yaroslav Askarov 4, at best, for Askarov, because there might have been another free agent in there that they went and offered. Who knows?
Yeah. I just think of like, you have to think of it, again, you talk about having to maybe pony up a couple extra years of term for Saros that maybe you don't want to, but that's what you have to do to get him. Again, I know we've said this before, but I keep going back to, if Saros is not your starting goalie, you don't get Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea, all those guys. You don't. That doesn't happen.
It broke on Friday night, the 2 days before they signed all those guys.
And exactly, and none of this stuff, like nothing happens in a vacuum. Like everything, there's an effect. Every move has an effect on other moves, and I think that if you have Askarov as your starter, that sends a completely different message to the rest of the NHL, which is, hey, we're tearing this shit down and starting over. And so again, I think Askarov has hurt himself here, because I'm not saying that he's not ever going to have a future in the NHL and that he's not going to be a really talented NHL goaltender. Who's to say? I don't know. But I think that what he has done now is he has set the bar so much higher for himself. And he's now talked this big game and he hasn't proven it. I'm not saying he can't prove it, but he just hasn't yet. You have to remember, this kid just turned 22. He's only had 2 seasons in the AHL. I don't care if you were a top, 11, what was he, the 11th pick? Like, I don't care.
11 or 12, yeah.
I don't care that you were the top goalie picked in your class. Like, I don't care. Once you enter the system, once you enter the farm system, you get a clean slate, in my opinion. Like, everyone starts at square one. It doesn't matter where you were drafted. So I think that it's just like an inflated sense of self-importance that I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's his agent. Maybe he's just surrounding himself with people who are constantly telling him how amazing he is. Maybe it's just the fact that he's part of Gen Z and everyone in Gen Z thinks they're amazing. I'm sorry, but
aren't you a Gen Zer?
Shut up. I am not. I'm a proud millennial. I think that...
Okay, see, I was born a millennial and don't identify as one. I'm transitioning out of millennial. I'm transitioning to Gen X, I think, right? What was before me? I think it was Gen X.
Gen X.
The fact that you and I are in the same generation is the problem.
Well, yeah, I think it depends who you ask to. Millennial is very... You're an older millennial. I'm a younger millennial.
I am a geriatric millennial. There's no question.
See, that's why I like identifying as a millennial, because then I can say I'm a young millennial. I'm still young. Yeah.
You're young. You're young at the party you're at. I've aged out of the party altogether. So
see, I think
a different party.
Sometimes I think, oh, I'm not that much older than Gen Z. And then I spend more than 5 minutes talking to someone who's in Gen Z. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm a lot older. We're not the same.
That sounds like your journey, Emma, that you need to go through.
Listen, okay. I think that part of this, I don't think it's any one thing. I think part of it is his generation. I think part of it is where he was drafted. I think part of it is whoever he has surrounded himself with, whether it's agents or advisors, friends, I don't know. Like,
and having a big personality and being confident in your abilities, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, it doesn't
make you ready to play in the NHL, but there's nothing wrong with it.
No, I think, again, I would argue that it could be a really good thing if you channeled it properly to say, hey, I think that I am better than this. I deserve better than this. I have one more year on this contract. Let me put my head down and do the fucking work and prove it, and not just go out and throw a hissy fit until I get traded.
Peter says, is 1980 a millennial? I've always been under the impression that 1980 was year one. Patrick says 1981 to 96. These are important issues of our time. I'm 82 and I am definitely a millennial. Again, geriatric at best. So what I think is interesting is, like, if you disagree and are critical of, and this is going to sound like Homer radio here, where we are like, just like all over Barry Trotz and the Preds for their decision making. And it's okay if you disagree with their big picture plan, but you can't talk about the tactics that they've deployed here. You have to go all the way back to the Saros contract and the entire strategy and say, if you disagree with what's happened because of Askarov's trade request, then you sort of have to disagree with the entire strategy, which is we should trade UC Saros, not sign free agents, rebuild from scratch, add more assets, and lose games for a few years. That would be the other path. Those are the only two paths. The path is try to win with Saros and free agents and a team that overachieved with a coach that maximized talent and a young farm system that's developing. That's path one. The other path is to trade UC Saros and tear it all down even further. There's not really an in-between. And so if you disagree and are critical of the organization for the decision-making that led us to Askarov's trade request, then you sort of have to disagree with all of it. You don't get to pick and choose, in my opinion. And I'm okay with that. If you want to come on here and say, look, I think we should have traded UC Saros. I think we should have done this. I don't think we should have spent money in free agency. I don't think this is going to put us over the top. I don't, blah, 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 blah. That's okay to have that take. And it might be right. But you have to sort of disagree with all of it. You can't pick and choose because Saros and the free agents go together. Winning and Saros and the free agents they go together. You're going on a totally different journey. Not to use that phrase. I
love that journey for you because that's your journey.
Ultimately, like none of this is you like the fact that he decided to come out and ask for a trade does not change the fact they should have signed UC Saros. If anything, it proves that they should have.
Right.
So I'm just lost on the criticism here, I guess.
Well, again, I hope to God, and I'm not, you know what? I'm not even going to say it out loud because I am that superstitious, but I hope the thing that would happen, that would potentially happen, that would make people say, oh, we never should have gotten rid of Askarov, or we never should have signed Saros. I really hope that thing doesn't happen because those people are going to be insufferable.
But what could it, like, what even is that? Not to your point, was not speak it out loud, but it's like,
it's like
horrifyingly tragic.
It's like he who shall not be named. Like we're not going to talk about it. But I think
he was not in the rundown today. Okay.
Hey, that's true. I don't even know who you're talking about.
Exactly.
But I think it's exactly what you said is like what I said before. None of this happens in a vacuum. Like these things don't happen independently from each other. The free agents don't come without Saros. The winning now doesn't come without Saros. You want a Stanley Cup in the next 5 years? Askarov is not your guy. Sorry. Like
Western Conference final is because you see Saros and the free agents and the strategy. It may all blow up in their face. Like, again, let's be very honest about this. They could lose in the first round 3 straight years and all the players need to they move on from, and it like didn't work. It's absolutely possible that it didn't work, but we're going to hang all of that on an undeveloped 22-year-old goalie prospect. Like that seems like absolute bonkers decision-making. So I don't know. I don't understand the criticism. That's just my perspective. It does not mean that all of Barry Trotz's decisions have been perfect or that all of the strategies have been perfect. We don't know that, but it seems stupid to say, oh, this young hotshot goaltender prospect requests a trade because he's not happy with being in the AHL. And like, that's the reason to tear down the entire organization's decision-making. I don't know. It just seems silly to me. So
I just think that it's like with arguments like that, I keep coming back to, I think people were so excited about, the transition from David Poile to Barry Trotz, because David Poile historically very risk averse, like it went well except when it comes to signing Ryan Johansen to
competitive rebuild.
Yeah, competitive rebuild. Very risk averse. He's not going to make these big splashy moves. And I think that people were excited that, the transition to Trotz would mean like, ooh, we're going to take more risks and we're going to buck the tradition and we're going to go with all these young kids and we're going to do all that. I mean, no, like yes and no, because yes, David Poile, I don't think is going out and signing Steven Stamkos. I don't think he's doing that. But
no.
So like you still get your little fun, risky move there, but at the same time, you're not. Why would you want to get rid of the proven asset in UC Saros?
I'm with you. By the way, one of us said they should go out and get Steven Stamkos way before free agency, but It wasn't.
General manager Braden Gall.
It was definitely not Patrick Laine, though, even though I wrote that story.
I was gonna say, wasn't that like one of the first things you wrote?
Yeah. I was just making the case. I was making the case. It turns out Steven Stamkos is a better version of that, which he is. Here's the other thing too, like not to belabor the Barry Trotz defense here, but like if you look at the body of work, which granted is only about 16 months old now. If you look at the body of work, almost everything he's done has been brilliant, at least to date. Pick the coach. Coach worked out. Pick the trade deadline, not the big one where they traded all the pieces, which I'm assuming, and I talked to David Poyle about at the time. He was just sort of there, like he was just making the moves. Barry Trotz was making the decisions, and that while David Poyle had to technically push buttons and submit things, that Barry Trotz was the one doing all the decision making. So it's not just that deadline, but it's 2 trade deadlines where they go get players like Zucker. And he ends up having one of the best postseasons for the team. Like, look at the free agent moves. Look at the draft picks. Look at the trades. How many of them? Okay.
Thank you, Patrick. This is why I've been smiling this whole time.
Sorry.
I think we can all agree.
He did overpay Voldemort. That's true.
There is one very obvious blunder here. But to that end, I agree with you. I think the entire body of work overall, brilliant.
And I mean, like, if you're a baseball player here, we're talking about like he's like 17 for 20 or something. You know, like I don't know what the exact numbers are. I'm making that up, but yes, Voldemort is one of the bad decisions. That's fair. No arguments there. So what ultimately, and this is you told me that people were talking about the Ryan Johansen thing is why they shouldn't have traded Cody Glass, and I would say this about Askarov as well, and the Cody Glass trade. We said it. Barry Trotz has done the obvious thing most of the time. He has done the logical, obvious thing most of this year and a half. Trading Cody Glass was something we all talked about on a number of occasions as the next strategy move. And then he went and did it. And so, again, with Askarov, if you are going to clearly indicate to everyone under the sun that he is not ready for the NHL, and you go sign UC Saros and Scott Wedgwood and tried to sign Kevin Lincoln, you tried to sign 3 goaltenders before bringing him up. The obvious thing is that he's probably not super happy about it, and that you've been trying to trade him for over a year. Like this is all, to me, very logical stuff. So Ryan Johansen story. I'm not going to lie to you, Emma. File it under things I am not shocked by. If you would have told me any player in the NHL was going to get their contract terminated for, quote, material breach, which could be a number of things, unfortunately, Ryan Johansen would be at the top of the list. I don't say that with like a happy, smiley, joyful face. It just fits. And it
could be a number of things, and I don't want to speculate what those things are because that's not fair. But exactly. I do think that I would agree. It's not entirely shocking.
Body of work.
Yes. Now, what I will say, like I don't know what he did or didn't do, like, frankly, none of my business, but I will say one thing, kind of shitty. He was literally on his honeymoon. Like, he was on day 2 of his honeymoon when they, like, I'm sorry, that's kind of,
he's a human being, and I agree with you.
I'm just saying.
But he's making $8 million to not play hockey. My bleeding heart does not go out to him. So.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. I'm not, like, I don't feel bad for him. I mean,
on some $100 million yacht somewhere. Like, I don't.
Yeah. Financially, I do not feel bad for him. But I think that, yes, it's not entirely surprising. But what's also not entirely surprising is that he is expected to almost immediately file a grievance with the Players Association.
So we can walk through this. So the Philadelphia Flyers say, we are going to terminate Ryan Johansen's contract for material breach, which could be a number of things. It could be training related. It could be injury related. It could be behavior related. It could be a bunch of different things. There's a chance that it's all of the above, but we don't know. And again, unfortunately, his reputation and personality, which is very entertaining to be around, does precede him in this situation, certainly with Predators fans. And so that's where there's just probably not a lot of shock and awe in this. He's owed $4 million in trade retention by the Nashville Predators. That money is going to still be on the, quote unquote, on the books until this whole thing is resolved. And we assume at time of taping, we don't know officially, but at time, like the agent and the player are going to file a grievance against the Flyers. They then have 60 days to make their case, which they have said they are going to do, which means all of the information of the what happened here will probably come out. And at that point, I guess it's the Players Association and the league that come to an agreement, which could be technically like a mediated salary figure, in which case the Predators would be on the hook for half of whatever that number could be. If they come to some agreement that says, all right, look, Ryan, we're going to terminate the contract, but we'll settle at $2 million. We'll pay you the $2 million buyout. The Preds take $1 million of that because that's the number they retained. And then I guess that $1 million just stays on the salary cap. There's a chance that the PA and the league rule in favor of the Flyers, in which case the Predators get $4 million in cap space just gifted back to them because of whatever Ryan Johansen potentially did. That's the gist of it. And I don't think it can be taken in any sort of connected way to anything else. And to do that seems awfully silly. It is a gift potentially to the organization. That's sort of all you can think of. Like, okay, maybe it's a $4 million gift. Maybe it's a $3 million gift. Maybe it's a $1 million gift. But it's just sort of a lucky thing that's going to happen to the organization. So.
Yeah, it's a gift either way. Like worst case scenario, they rule in favor of Johansen, and okay, you're still on the hook for $4 million. Like nothing changed, nothing got worse from what it was before. For the Flyers, it could potentially get worse if they do rule in his favor, because the Flyers can get hit with a cap penalty on top of that. Ooh. But that's not our problem.
Drama, I like it.
I think.
Don't you feel like they do, like this is a pretty rare move for a team, right?
Yeah. Well,
doesn't it feel like they would be pretty confident in their case?
Well, here's the thing. You have to remember. So when he was traded, so obviously Nashville traded him to Colorado. Colorado then flipped him at the deadline as part of the Sean Walker trade. And it was it was a salary dump, right? And so they got him to Philadelphia. It became immediately clear that Philadelphia had no intention of him ever playing an NHL game.
They sent him to the AHL the first day.
They sent him to the AHL immediately.
No, he cleared waivers.
Well, that's the thing. They put him on waivers immediately, hoping, I guess, that someone would claim him, and then it would be no harm, no foul. No one claimed him. Well, shit. Now we got to assign him to Lehigh Valley. They did that, and then as soon as he gets there, oops, he doesn't pass his physical, and now he can't play. And so all of it, and so as a result of that,
the most Ryan Johansen story of all time.
I know. As a result of that, though, they could not terminate his contract at the end of the season because of his injury status. You can't terminate a contract due to injury. I don't know exactly what the rules are regarding that, but they were not eligible to terminate his contract. This was the earliest that they possibly could, and they did it. And so I think that, maybe again, it's not, like I said, it's not fair to speculate, but I think if you look at his injury history, it was cited, the reason he didn't pass his physical was because of the hip injury that has bothered him for years. And it's like, well, why is that all of a sudden too big of a problem? It's just,
they were claiming a severe, a heavy, severe injury that's a long-term,
it's like if it was that severe, then how did he play half a season in Colorado?
Had some moments that wasn't terrible. So,
well, I was gonna say, it's not that he played that well, but
I said moments.
Yes, he had moments. He was a serviceable bottom six center for Colorado, but the problem is Colorado. Well, Colorado wanted him to be a top six forward. Clearly, that didn't work out, and they still end up coming out of this with a win because they went and got Casey Middlestat. So they solved that problem. Yeah. But now that leaves Johansen, who clearly Philadelphia didn't even want him. It was just well, if we have to take him to get the guy that we really want, then I guess we will. And then they immediately put him on waivers. So it's clearly they never wanted him, but you also need to have grounds for contract termination. So clearly they have come up I would like to think that they've done their homework and done their research, and legally they have grounds to. It's
the lawyers. The only one that wins in this situation is the billable hours, or maybe the Predator salary cap. Yes. I believe it was Corey Perry with Chicago where that happened with Corey Perry in Chicago. They terminated his contract for cause, and then it went to negotiations, and they settled it on an undisclosed amount. And then whoever had him previously was on the hook for whatever the retention was. So
I don't think there was any retention in that one, but Chicago would have been on the hook to pay him whatever. But
so and so we'll get to Patrick's question here. It says, if the $4 million comes back, do you all still anticipate another move, or does Barry Trotz keep it stashed away? We'll get to that in a second. But I think what's interesting is, like, it feels like a pretty bold move if you don't think you've got grounds. They also, in their press release or in their release, were like, and if we have to put our case out there, we're going to do it. So like they were pretty, words, they didn't mince words on the press release. But either way, look, it's okay to say, look, I wish Ryan Johansen the best. I hope I appreciate what he did here. Probably the best center maybe in franchise history, most accomplished in the postseason. Like, you can say a lot of things. This is, again, all things can be true. And you can also say, man, I sure hope he broke some rule so that we can get $4 million back on the cap, because that would make a $7 million cap hit, or $7 million in cap space going into camp on a team that just spent like crazy to win is it feels like a pretty rare situation to be in. It also means they can sign all the RFAs and not worry about having to make another move, which means they can keep their depth intact on the blue line. So it
does not mean, friends, that they should have kept Cody Glass. They still should have traded Cody Glass.
I agree.
Because just because they now have the room, or potentially could have the room to keep him, he still wasn't gonna get playing time. So I just want to get that out there. But I agree with you. After a team that spends big to win now, this is, as you said earlier, it is a gift. It's a gift that we should treat it as such. If it does come to fruition, it's a bonus. You can't rely on that. You can't depend on it. You don't know if it's even going to be there at the end of the day.
But it will be resolved well before the deadline. So if the issue, you would think, again, 60 days is still basically the first month of the season. And if the deadline's in mid-February or whatever, late February, we're not going to be anywhere near the trade deadline, hopefully, when it's resolved. So the point is that the Preds should know exactly what their cap situation is if and when they need to make a move, whether that's early in the season because of an injury or around the deadline because they want to go for it. Like, they should have clarity, and whether it's 3 million plus or 7 million, or if they trade another piece, Fabro or whoever else. So I think this is all just found money, and if it works in your favor, just treat it as such. Be grateful for it, and then see what you could do with that money. But I do think it opens up Trotz to go get a big name rental, or a big name who's overpriced that needs to be dumped. And in which case the acquisition costs could be very low to go get a piece that's on the last year of a deal that they're trying to get rid of salary cap space. Like, they're having $7 million to go get a forward or a center. Deadline is pretty luxurious.
I really like the idea of using that at the deadline rather than using it now. Agreed. Because all of the big names, like the big name rentals, the guys who are really going to help you, aren't going to be on the market right now, in theory. And I think that using that cap space to actually make a splash, make an impact at the deadline, is going to help you more in the long run. That's assuming that they're in a spot to be buyers at the deadline. But I would agree with you on that.
So when somebody asked, Eric says, was it a left hip back in 16-17 when Kessler hit him in that conference final? Also, is it potentially an injury that got cracked open again? I want to say he needed surgery, and wasn't it tied to like a blood vessel in the leg? And again, I don't want to.
Well, that was his most recent injury.
I'm talking about in the playoffs against against the Ducks, where he has this really scary, bizarre hit, and it was in his hip area, I think. And what I want to say the reason, because he skates off the ice. I was at the game. He skates off the ice. Nobody really notices, and then he's rushed, I think, to the hospital later that afternoon or that evening, and they realize that, oh, this is a really serious issue. It needs to be addressed with surgery. I think it was that night. I think it was later that night he has surgery to fix something in his okay, so what is this, compartment syndrome? Is that correct? I don't want to use the YouTube comments to report information. But I do trust Mitch. I do trust Mitch and Josh. You guys are good, smart Predators folks. So but could it be tied to that? I'm not I'm not a doctor. I don't know.
According to the Cleveland Clinic, compartment syndrome is a painful buildup of pressure around your muscles. I do think that Cleveland Clinic is a credible source to cite here, but I
Okay.
think that
But is that what he had?
well, it sounds like it because it's something that happens as a result. It's something that happens a lot in like car crashes or any kind of high impact injury where like it might not be immediately evident, but it's kind of like the after effect or a secondary effect from an impact injury.
Johansen suffered acute compartment syndrome during the 3-2 overtime loss to Anaheim on May 18th, requiring emergency surgery. The injury, which involves fluid or blood swelling inside of a muscle, can lead to serious complications and potentially even loss of limb.
Yeah, so I think they have to cut open the muscle to relieve the pressure.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Look at you, like doing like scalpel stuff. By the way, this is also really depressing in the story, going back to our millennial conversation. It says the next paragraph, the 24-year-old center hadn't missed a game since being traded to the Predators on January 6, 2016. He was 24? Get out of here with that garbage. That is bullshit.
That's ridiculous.
Yes, Patrick, come for the hockey, stayed for the medical education.
Yeah, definitely listen to everything I have to say about medicine.
It sounds like you and I were both very right. That's what it sounds
like. I mean, you say anything with confidence. Just again, let me remind everyone here that I was indeed a Spanish and politics major. But please come to me for all your questions about muscular injuries and treatment. Because I was also a ballerina, so I know quite a bit about that too. Never had compartment syndrome though.
Ballerina, Spanish, politics. Okay.
It's a Renaissance woman.
And
I'm full of surprises.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. All right. So otherwise, I'm look, we are still weeks away from camp opening up. There are a few things that are sort of on the docket for them to accomplish, whether that's an RFA or a trade or whatever. I think it seems very logical that Barry Trotz is operating on the assumption that the $4 million is not going to come to his team. That's the way he should do it. And then as soon as he finds out what break they get, then you can operate with that information at the time. So I think it's way more about a trade deadline. And I guess somebody kind of called it a rainy day fund. It's like, I think it's not even a rainy day fund. It's like, there's a chance if they are in contention, they need to make a move around the deadline because that's what hockey teams do. And so having some extra space, real big, real nice benefit for the Predators. So I don't know. Like, people are criticizing Trotz for this Askarov thing, but if they end up getting, you want to on the same day, there's a chance that the move to trade Ryan Johansen at a cost of $4 million a year is clearly the right decision by Barry Trotz.
Give him GM of the year right fucking now if that works out.
I can't believe that all these decisions that Barry Trotz have made have led to a 22-year-old goalie prospect requesting a trade. I second guess everything he's done. But man, I hope that $4 million comes off the books.
Yeah, like come on now. No, I think it's
direct contradiction.
Plus, I mean, really the only one, even if this, contract thing with Johansen holds up and they don't lose the $4 million cap hit, still after this year, that comes off the books. After this year, Ekholm comes off the books. That's what, 2.5?
No, Ekholm's like $250K.
Or 250. Oh, I was thinking Kyle Turris, who will never end.
Turris is $2.5 million.
Yes. Yeah. Turris, again, Bobby Bonilla of the Predators will be paid until he dies. And then I think really the only big one you have to worry about after that is Duchesne. And that one does hurt. It hurts you. But I think
it goes up.
It goes up and then dips back down. So
6 1/4 or 6 1/8, I think, something like that.
Yeah. So that one will sting for a little bit, but again, even if the Johansen thing doesn't hold up and they're still on the hook for $4 million, that's off the books after this year anyway. So you're still getting $4 million back next year, which is probably how Barry Trotz was operating. That was the thought process, because that's the timeline you should be operating with that information, because you're not guaranteed to have that until next year. So that's why you sign UC Saros to an extension that technically starts next season.
Yep. Yeah. Josh says, I believe the cap hit is prorated, so $4 million is quite a bit at the deadline. That's a good thing to remember. I should have said that. They have about $3 million and some change right now. They will get, it's not, you don't get $4 million as soon as the player association rules or whatever, or the league rules. It would be whatever's left on the deal, but also whatever player you're acquiring is that contract is prorated too. So if you go get a $9 million player and they've already played 60% of the season, well, $5.5 million of that's already been paid. So like you've got to, everything is sort of prorated. So it all sort of evens out around the deadline, just to be clear. So it's okay to call it $4 million in space if that happens. I think so. Eric says, I believe Turris is 2 million, not 2.5, but for a long time still. I think that might be right. Actually, I think it's 2 million. But either way,
I got the 2.5 because Ekholm's 250K.
Yeah,
I think
it was 6. I want to say it was 6
Spanish major.
I want to say it was 6 years. $2 million a year for 6 years. I thought it was the buyout for Turris, which is absurd.
I would love to get paid $2 million a year for 6 years to not work. You know
what the lesson is in the Kyle Turris saga? The lesson is, if you're single, don't settle. If you follow my analogy,
I do. Don't settle. It's true.
Don't settle because we all wanted Dutchy. We all wanted Matt Duchene, and we settled for Kyle Turris.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
Also, neither did Duchene.
Well, Duchene worked out for a little bit longer than Turris did.
Yeah, Kyle Turris's working out was like 4 months. It was good for like 4 months, and then
at least we got some good years out of Duchene, and then.
All right, so I think everybody just take a deep breath. It's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a wild year. We've got great stuff planned for you at Lower Broad Hockey, so come on over and subscribe. The water's warm. The chat room is great. It's way more comfortable and relaxing than Elon's sewer. So come on over and hang out in the chat room. We've got good information and insight in there that you can't get in public. It's for subscribers only. That's why it's there.
In public makes it sound like it's some kind of after dark that you can't get it in public.
Lewd and lascivious, I think is the word, or lascivious. Anyway, if you're on YouTube and you're watching, please give us a thumbs up. We would really appreciate it. You guys, all you commenters, man, you've been great. It's growing every time we do this. We will eventually finalize a time and day to do the show, the free one. But as a part of our growth at Lower Broad Hockey, we will have other things to offer you guys from an audio video standpoint as soon as all the announcements are made. So stay tuned, subscribe, and it will all make sense. And then we will figure out a time to do the show every week. Probably on Wednesday morning, maybe. What do you think, Emma? Do you want to live produce this thing right now for everybody?
I mean, sure.
Otherwise, safe travels to Michael Gallagher. Getting back into town. If you want to tweet at him at @MGSports_, tweet him, I don't know, your favorite pictures of Voldemort. Like not even the guy we're talking about, just actual Voldemort pictures.
But tweet him to remind him to like stay off of Twitter while he's on vacation or just in general, maybe.
That's right. Don't take the bait. Don't engage in fools. All that kind of stuff. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, please share the product. If you're listening on the podcast app, thank you. And rate, review, and subscribe so that folks can find the show. Tell somebody about Lower Broad Hockey and the Gold Standard and 440 Sports. It means a lot to us. And it's how we grow this thing because, again, with a subscription community, the money that you guys put in is what you will get out of it. That's the goal, is to sort of reinvest it all back in you guys. So really appreciate, Emma, your time. You want to tell everybody? You're everywhere, too. So tell everybody where you are these days. Well, outside of First Tennessee Park, apparently.
Yeah. Well, I mean... What can I say?
Is it even called that now, or is it called something else?
It's First Horizon Park.
My bad.
Actually, no. Well, in a couple months, you will find me at Bridgestone Arena all the time. But I am also I'm covering the Predators at the Hockey News. But then you can also find me at Lower Broad Hockey covering the NHL at large, how it impacts the Predators, doing a special focus on the Central Division Thankfully, it appears that the GMs are waking up this week because there's actually lots of things going on, even aside from Askarov and Johansen and all this. I mean, we've got Patrick Laine getting traded. We've got offer sheets.
Can you give me like a 60-second why the St. Louis Blues and Edmonton Oilers saga is so interesting? Can you give me like 60 seconds on that?
In 60 seconds?
Yeah, can you do the whole thing?
No. I'm a woman of many words. Okay, I can't do that.
Let's see what you got.
I mean, it's interesting because first of all, offer sheets are always interesting. Like, it's always fun. It's exciting. And this Edmonton, or this, with the new regime in Edmonton now, with the new GM, new everything else, it's, people are joking that, oh, well, this GM has done what the previous regime couldn't do for years or whatever, even though he really didn't do anything. He just refused to match an offer sheet. Right. 2 offer sheets, actually. And they both end up going to the same team. And I think that
So St. Louis offers 2 free agents for the Oilers.
Oh, you're asking me to just explain what happened?
Give me the quick thing.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought you were like asking for my take on it. I'm
no.
Offer sheets. I don't know. Yeah, no. So
offer sheets are riveting. I'm single for a reason. No, just kidding.
Okay. Oh, actually, I'm not. So, but anyway, I think that, so what happened was that the St. Louis Blues have offer sheeted 2 players on the Edmonton Oilers, which means that the 2 restricted free agents. So the Oilers can either match those offers or let them walk to the new teams. It was kind of assumed that maybe at least one of them would get matched, because you rarely let 2 RFAs go, especially in a situation like that. Didn't happen. Offers weren't matched. Both players from the Oilers are now members of the St. Louis Blues. Affects the Predators how? Because the Blues are in their division.
Yep. And the Edmonton Oilers could have offered them the money if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not really sure why the GMs are in a little tiff here.
Well, and the new Oilers GM, let us all remember, was at the forefront of the Kyle Beach situation in Chicago. So, real popular guy. Yeah.
Front office at Edmonton. Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, congrats to you. That's cool.
And for like almost 6 months now.
I did not know. Look, it's the summertime.
Surprise! I was not planning to do that, but I guess I just launched my relationship.
Sorry, my bad.
On the podcast.
What's fascinating is just like, I like long walks on the beach and offer sheets. It's my idea of a good time on a Friday night.
I thought you were. The sad part is that's not entirely inaccurate, but I thought you were asking for my take. Even Minka has shown up to say
hello.
What the hell, man?
Hello, Minka.
Yeah, anyway. I'm actually in a relationship with my dog. That's what it is.
That's true too. I got Willie Nelson wandering around here somewhere. So Minka Fitzpatrick and Willie Nelson,
the dynamic duo.
2 dogs on the show. All right, that is Emma Lingan. I am Braden Gall. Michael Gallagher will be back next week, so we do appreciate that. Again, all of you sign up. Lower Broad Hockey. Follow us on the socials. Share the product. Share the show. We do appreciate all you guys for listening and for hanging out. We will be back next week. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and thanks for listening. We appreciate it.